I wanted to share a methodology for if you're working in production in After Effects, a way you can approach doing your animation for multiple different deliveries. So this is not going to apply to everybody, but if you're doing some kind of product stuff or you're doing perhaps sports graphics, anything where you need to make iterations on one particular thing. And the benefit of this is that you could have one animation timeline. In this case, right here, we have four different aspect ratios. We have two different flavors, and then the talent mock-ups, we're using three different age groups to cast a wider net for your marketing funnel or whatever it is. So what I'm going to do is walk you through a quick little setup and then show you kind of how that works. Okay, cool. The idea here is to get through this pretty quick, just give you a basic kind of rundown on how this works. We want to create a large comp that we can work with, that's going to encompass any of the changes that we're going to need. Let's say for our deliverables that we're concentrating on now, the widest we're going to get is 1920. So we create a 1920 by 1920 square. The goal here is to set this up on the level where the animation is kind of contained that you might want to propagate into anything else. Let's say that we've got four different aspect ratios that we're going to deal with. What we do real quickly is just set up some maths. I'll go into the 16 by 9 version. It's just a color gray that's a little bit off the background gray, so you can kind of tell where the border of the comp is, but it's also kind of gets out of the way a little bit. And then we just have the composition that this would be the intended size, and we're just going to knock that out. So we have the four different versions set up, and the way we have it linked is I just created a null, and this null I just called it comp control. And there's a drop down menu effect, which you can find in the effects and presets. It's for expression controls. So we have the drop down menu, and then we edit the menu just to create the four different variables of the aspect ratio that we're going to need. And on this this comp control right here, that's about it for that layer. But now what we want to do is, if this is selected, we only want to show this mat right here. So it's just a very simple expression that's set up right here, which just declares this variable right here, which could be really named anything. So you're declaring the variable, and then you're just linking it up to this menu right here. So if I was to just do this from scratch, you just select what you want to change, add it to pick whip it to the menu controller right there, and then this is important. You got to add a dot value at the end of that. This expression is on the opacity of the layer. So the opacity is going to be 100 if this menu is selected, and if anything else is selected in this menu, it's going to be 0. And we select a 1 by 1. We get the 1 by 1 version, the vertical version, and this is a custom setup for a screen that was in Times Square, so we just call it Times Square. The next step is going to help you with all your repositioning of your different elements. So what we're going to want to do is create a new null object, and we'll call this repo 01. We'll call this repo 01. Okay. What we're going to want to do is have this repo controller change positions and scale based on what our comp control drop down menu says. We're going to get a point control. Now, depending on what kind of comp you have, you can use the 3D point control or the 2D point control. Let's just go with the this one for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up four different positions, which will cover our four different aspect ratios, and then four different positions for scale, and I'll link that all up. Okay, so we can see right here, we just created these effects, the point controllers, and the repo, and we just named them appropriately. So they're just now these are basically just create our inputs for where we want the null to move to based on here. So the next step would be to set up the expression. I'll fast forward that real quick, then I'll walk you through it. Okay, so the first part is just to make some variables, which are just like little containers for what this data is that's going to pass it on. So it's position 1, 2, 3, and 4, which we pick whipped to the position 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here, and then we grabbed the value of what our current drop-down menu is selected at, and now comes the part where you're just going to write. We're going to write an if statement. The position is going to say if the drop menu is equal to 1, then use this position 1, which we're pulling from over here, and it goes through all those 4 different ones to get the position. So let's set it up for the scale now. Okay, so, and just a quick thing too about scale. Scale is a value where you have your X and your Y, so it's an array. So you got 2 different values. So right now we're saying, let's declare a variable, scale 01, and scale 01 is equal to 100, 100. And then this is just declaring a variable and giving it a value. And then this right here is just saying, okay, now use that for this scale. So what we want to do is change this to be our controllers over here. All right, so we just went through and then we made these 4 different variables, assigned them to each one of the corresponding scales over here. Let's get our drop menu variable in here as well. Okay, so that looks like that's all set up. So we have our variables for the different scale that we're grabbing that information from over here. We have a drop menu. We're grabbing, checking what the current composition is supposed to be for aspect ratio. And then we're just saying, okay, so if we're setting up this aspect ratio, then get your value from the appropriate place. So if we were to take a very simple shape, let's say, okay, so we have our shot A and our circle is parented to the controller. Let's go in our essential graphics and set this up. So we'll grab the shot A that we're in. Oh, actually, I don't think we're in that one. We are in this one, sorry. Okay, so we're in our shot A, and then let's take this drop-down menu effect that we created. Let's grab this menu, bring it up here, and we will call this aspect ratio. So now we have that, and now what we would want to do is, this is essentially like our animation, and then you still need to go through and create your different like render comps. These are going to be the ones that you select and you hit the render button. So what we would do is we drop this inside of another one, and then you want to name your render comp. So let's just call this render 16 by 9. Shot A right here has the animation in it, but what I need to do is render out the different versions. So I'm going to create comps that represent all our different deliverables. So if I take the shot A and drop it into a composition, put that up here, let's call this our render 1 by 1. Let's create our different renders. Okay, so we created our 4 different comps. Now we just got to size them appropriately for the deliverable that they need to be. Okay, so now let's go back to our 1 by 1, and then in here we should have our essential properties. Let's set this to the 1 by 1. In our 9 by 16, let's set this to our 9 by 16. In our 16 by 9, let's set this to 16 by 9. And in our times square, let's set this to times square. So just to show you how this kind of works, now that we have the basic setup kind of done, it looks like nothing's really happening, but now let's go into our shot A right here and work to make some changes across the project. So, okay, so let's start with our 16 by 9 comp right here, and let's reposition this circle. So we'll grab the positioner and go to our 16 by 9, And let's say we're going to make the circle at the bottom edge of every comp. And then we'll go to our 1x1. We'll grab our repo controller, move it down. Our vertical comp here. Move that down. Our Times Square comp. And just to show you the scale works as well, let's make this one bigger for Times Square. And let's position it right there. Okay, so now when we go back up to our render comp, look, we can see that the ball is positioned at the very bottom of the screen. Same thing with our 9x16 version. Our 16:9 version is at the bottom of the screen here. And if we look at our render for Times Square, it's bigger and it's over there. So if we want to real quick, just maybe it would be good just to put some keyframes on here, just to be a little bit more explicit about what's going on here. Okay, so now if we look through our comps, we just put a little bit of animation just to see. So we've got our bouncing ball that's going to the bottom of the screen there. Let's run it on our vertical. We can see our vertical is repositioned. Let's run it on our 16:9. We can see our 16:9 is repositioned. And then our Times Square version, which is a little bit bigger. All right, cool. So that's a nice little setup, and that'll get you kind of started. Let me show you how it can work on the first example that I was kind of showed you. Okay, so in each deliverable on the timeline, I actually have two shots that are set up. There's the shot one, which has the type, and then there's the lockup, and there's a little bit of a transition happening between them. I just cut out some frames in the middle just to make the transition a little bit snappier. Okay, so and the shots are set up like this, and then there's just some effects on top of it, a little bit of distortion, and then a red bullet, a magic bullet looks is on top of everything. And then it's a nice way to set this up if you have some global effects that you want on every comp. You can put that on the top level. So if we go into shot one, where the type is animated, so let's look. If we're on our 16:9 version right now, if we want to check what our 1x1 is doing, you can see that our type scaled down a little bit. The background didn't change. If we go into our size control right here, we can see if we switch to like our 9x16 version, you know, the matte is giving us an idea what our working aspect ratio is, and the type changed a little bit as far as repositioning. You can see our Times Square version, our 16:9 version, and our 1x1 version, where the type is scaled down a little bit more for that version. And then we also have some selectors for the different color palettes that we're doing in the background, and that is done pretty simply. There's just an effect for Colorama, one for lemon colors and one for olive colors. So the colors are pretty simple. There's an olive color, which is actually coming from the Colorama down here. Sorry, this is the lemon color. So we can see that set up here, and then I just created a different version for the olive color, and all that's happening here is the drop menu is controlling the transparency on the layer, so it's just kind of showing one or the other depending upon what we need. All right, so the lockup comp has a little bit more going on, but it's pretty simple still. If we go up to our size controller, which I just put up on the top here, we can see the variables that we've set up. So we can choose between whether we're gearing towards a middle schooler kind of age for our product, or a toddler, or if we're marketing to a teen. We've got different talent options over there. And then if we go from the olive to the lemon flavor, our background color changes and the type and our tagline changed. And then we can also go to the different aspect ratios, and you can see that the repositioning of the tagline went up to the top here. Or if we go down to the Times Square version, the tagline is over here. We can add the toddler version. So all the parameters are kind of set up down here, and it's the characters were set up with the same type of expression set up on the opacity, and we have 3 different characters which are just set up here. Yeah, we just pick whipped this drop down menu to be controlled from this drop down menu over here. If we toggle between the lemon and the olive, all that's happening is we have those expressions set up on a colorama adjustment to be either the lemon flavors or the olive flavors. So it's just set up on the transparency of these 2 layers, and we're also changing the transparency on our tags over here. Either it says pitted olive or lucky lemon flavor if we change it over here. And then our logo type here is parented to one of those repo nulls. The tagline is parented to a repo null, and the talent is parented to a repo null. So if we go to, like, let's look at the tagline, you can see that the tagline positions are all kind of set up here. So this is just explicitly controlling where this tagline jumps around in the different comps. So right now we're in our Times Square version. So if I wanted to adjust this, I would use this controller over here. Because I'm not in the 1x1 version, if I tried to move this one around, it's not going to do anything until you go to the 1x1 version. And now if I was to go up into that that controller, and I'm in the 1x1 version, now if I move it up, we'll see the change. So sometimes you can be moving these sliders and be like, oh, what's going on? And then realize, oh, I lost track of where I was. So that's one thing you just got to watch out for a little bit. Okay, so as we go into the first deliverables, you can see this big long list. When it's render time, you just select them all and throw them into your render queue, and then you're going to probably do a little bit of QC just to make sure you didn't mess up any of these little switches. But this whole system is pretty powerful because as we're evaluating this this animation here right now, I played around with it for about a day just to kind of set up this demo. But if I was continuing to work on this, I think the way that transition changes, I'd probably want to do something a little bit different, perhaps, as it gets a little bit messy in there. And maybe I would play around with some of these background bubbles that I'm using particular for. I could maybe make those a little bit more prominent in the animation, since it says fizzies after all, and it's very bubbly. I can play around with that type of stuff because because these are all kind of coming out of the same 2 timelines for everything. Any animation change I make in those things right now is going to propagate through everything. So there's a little bit of initial setup, I think, in this, which is a little bit annoying to get going, but it kind of pays dividends in the end, because near the end of the project, or after you kind of got things to the point where you're reviewing all of your different deliverables. For those of you who've worked in production, this might sound familiar. It's like you get a 100% sign off on the 16:9 versions. The client says the animation's great on those, and then you go into versioning, and you're kind of delivering the end, and then somebody catches something and decides, oh, actually we're going to need to make a change to one element. And then you're powering through 24 different comps, making the same change, putting in the same parameter on a position keyframe,
for every single one. And if you've ever been in that situation, you know that that's pretty annoying. So what this is meant to do is to keep things flexible so that you're not kind of in that situation. You can, in a setup like this, you can just go to one spot and make the change, and it's going to propagate through all your different comps. Now the initial setup might not be valuable for you depending on what you're doing. So it's you got to weigh the pros and cons of everything. But I think that this kind of setup can be pretty helpful for some people. So just wanted to share that. Okay.